The contract sat between them like a third presence in the room. Yuna's hand trembled as she picked up the pen, her scholarship rejection letter still fresh in her backpack. Across the mahogany desk, Daniel Kang watched her with eyes that revealed nothing. 15 years her senior, impeccably dressed and completely unreadable. The marriage would last 1 year. She would receive enough money to finish medical school. He would receive whatever it was men like him needed from arrangements like these. You understand the terms? His voice was steady, businesslike. We live together. We appear in public as needed. No emotional attachment. Yuna nodded, though her stomach churned. 23 years old, orphaned at 16, and now selling the one thing she'd promised herself she'd give only for love. But her younger brother needed surgery. Her rent was 3 months overdue. Dreams she'd learned were luxuries the poor couldn't afford. She signed her name. Daniel countersigned without hesitation. Neither smiled. "I'll have my driver take you to the apartment tomorrow," he said, already turning back to his laptop. "Bring whatever you need. The wedding is in 2 weeks." Yuna left his office building and stood on the sole sidewalk, letting the evening crowd flow around her like water around a stone. She'd just agreed to marry a stranger. The weight of it settled on her chest, making it hard to breathe. Above the city, the sky had turned that particular shade of gray that meant rain was coming, but she didn't move. She let the first drops hit her face, cold and clean, washing away nothing. The penthouse was beautiful in the way museums were beautiful, meant to be admired, not lived in. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Han River. Everything was white, black, or chrome. Yuna set her 2 suitcases in the guest room Daniel had indicated would be hers, then stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of how worn her sneakers looked against the marble floor. "There's food in the kitchen," Daniel said from behind her. She turned. He'd loosened his tie, but still looked like he was posing for a magazine cover. "Help yourself to anything. I'm usually at the office until late." "Thank you," she said, because what else was there to say? He nodded and disappeared into what she assumed was his bedroom. Yuna heard the door click shut and realized, with a strange mixture of relief and loneliness, that this was how it would be. 2 strangers sharing space, nothing more. The wedding was small, efficient, like a business merger. Daniel's parents attended with polite, frozen smiles. His mother wore pearls and disappointment in equal measure. His father shook Yuna's hand with the enthusiasm of someone touching something distasteful. She had no one on her side of the aisle except her brother Junho, pale and thin in his borrowed suit, trying so hard to look happy for her. "You don't have to do this," he whispered during the reception, his eyes shining with unshed tears. He was only 19 but looked older, the way sick children always did. "I want to," she lied, squeezing his hand. "I love you. This is my choice." Daniel appeared beside them, and Junho tensed. But Daniel simply said, "Your surgery is scheduled for next month. Dr. Lee is the best in the country. You'll be fine." Junho's eyes widened. He looked at Yuna, then at Daniel, then back. "Thank you," he managed. Daniel nodded once and walked away to greet other guests. Yuna watched him go, something uncomfortable stirring in her chest. She'd expected coldness, distance, which she got. She hadn't expected kindness, however formal. Life fell into a strange rhythm. Daniel left before dawn and returned after dark. They rarely spoke beyond pleasantries. Yet he made sure the refrigerator was stocked with the foods she liked. When she mentioned once, just once, that she missed having plants, 3 orchids appeared on the windowsill the next day. When she studied late into the night for her medical exams, she'd find coffee waiting for her in the morning, still warm in an insulated mug, with a note in his precise handwriting. "Good luck today." She told herself it meant nothing. He was simply maintaining his investment. But late at night, when she couldn't sleep, she'd hear him on the other side of the wall, pacing, sometimes talking in a low voice on the phone in English, switching to Korean, his tone sharp with frustration. Once, she heard something that might have been crying, but the sound cut off so quickly she convinced herself she'd imagined it. The charity gala was their first major public appearance as a married couple. Yuna wore a dress Daniel's assistant had selected, midnight blue silk that made her feel like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. Daniel appeared in his tuxedo, and for a moment, something flickered across his face when he saw her. It vanished so quickly she might have imagined it. "You look beautiful," he said quietly. "Thank you." She didn't know what else to say. In 3 months of marriage, he'd never complimented her appearance. In the car, he briefed her on who would be there, which people to avoid, what topics were safe. His hand rested on the seat between them, close enough that she could feel its warmth. She had the strange urge to reach for it, but kept her hands folded in her lap. The gala was overwhelming, a sea of beautiful people in expensive clothes, all performing the elaborate dance of wealth and status. Daniel kept his hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd, introducing her with the same polite distance he used for everything. But his touch was gentle, protective even, and several times when men's eyes lingered too long on her, his hand tightened almost imperceptibly. "Your husband seems very possessive," an older woman remarked to Yuna while Daniel was getting them drinks. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Though I suppose that's to be expected with such a young wife. Tell me, dear, how did you two meet?" The words were poison wrapped in silk. Yuna felt her face burn. Before she could respond, Daniel appeared at her side. "We met through mutual friends," he said coolly. "And yes, I'm possessive. When you find something rare, you hold on to it." He handed Yuna her glass, his fingers brushing hers deliberately. "If you'll excuse us?" He guided her away, his jaw tight. Yuna's heart was racing, though she couldn't say why. They found a quiet corner near the terrace doors. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice low. "People here can be cruel. If you want to leave—" "No." She surprised herself with the firmness in her voice. "I'm not running away. I agreed to this. I'll fulfill my part." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something shifted in his expression. "You're stronger than I thought," he said softly. "You thought I was weak?" "I thought you were desperate. There's a difference." He paused, seeming to struggle with something. "I didn't expect you to have pride." It should have offended her, but the honesty was somehow refreshing. "I am desperate," she admitted, "but I'm not broken." "No," he agreed, his eyes still on hers. "You're not." For a moment, they just stood there, the sounds of the gala fading into background noise. Then someone called Daniel's name, and the moment shattered. He stepped back, the professional mask sliding back into place. "I should network," he said. "Will you be all right?" She nodded, and he disappeared into the crowd. Yuna touched her back where his hand had been, feeling the ghost of his warmth, and wondered when exactly this had started to feel like more than a transaction. Junho's surgery went perfectly. Yuna sat in the waiting room for 6 hours, drinking vending machine coffee and wearing a path in the linoleum. She'd told Daniel she didn't need him there. This wasn't part of their arrangement. But in the 4th hour, exhausted and terrified, she looked up to find him standing there in his work clothes, slightly rumpled, holding a paper bag. "I brought sandwiches," he said. "You haven't eaten. How did you—" "I called the hospital." He sat down beside her, not too close, respecting the space between them. "I hope that's okay." Tears pricked her eyes. She blinked them back furiously. "You didn't have to come." "I know." They sat in silence while she ate a sandwich she could barely taste. His presence was solid, steady, and she found herself leaning toward it like a plant toward sunlight. When the surgeon finally emerged to say Junho was fine, the surgery a success, Yuna burst into tears. Without thinking, Daniel pulled her into his arms. She froze for a heartbeat, then collapsed against him, sobbing into his expensive shirt while he held her and murmured things she couldn't quite hear but felt in her bones. "Thank you," she whispered when she could speak again. "For everything. For this. For him." Daniel's arms tightened around her briefly before he let go. "He's your family," he said simply. "That makes him important." She wanted to ask what that meant, if caring about Junho meant he cared about her too, but she was too tired and too overwhelmed. Instead, she just nodded, and they sat together until the nurses said she could see her brother. Things changed after that night, in ways both subtle and profound. Daniel started coming home earlier. They began having dinner together, at first in silence, then with halting conversation that gradually became easier. She learned he'd taken over his family's company at 25 when his father had a stroke. That the pressure to succeed, to prove himself worthy, had consumed his entire adult life. That he'd never had time for relationships, for anything except work, until it had become all he knew. "Why did you want to get married?" she asked one night over takeout. They were sitting on the floor by the coffee table, the formal dining room abandoned. "I mean, why this way?" He was quiet for a long moment. "My father," he said finally. "He's not well. He wanted to see me settled before he runs out of time, and I wanted him to have peace." "You couldn't have found someone the normal way." "The normal way requires time I don't have, and emotions I'm not good at." He looked at her, something vulnerable in his eyes. This seemed simpler, honest in its own way. We both knew what we were getting. And what are we getting? "I don't know anymore," he admitted softly. "Do you?" She didn't answer because she didn't know how to say that she'd started looking forward to their dinners, to the sound of his key in the door, to the way he remembered she took her coffee. That somewhere along the way, the stranger she'd married had become the person she most wanted to talk to. Her medical school graduation was small and bittersweet. She'd finally achieved the dream she'd been chasing, but the future felt uncertain. In 2 months, their contract would end. They hadn't discussed what would happen after. Daniel sat in the audience beside Junho, both of them applauding when she walked across the stage. When she looked at them, her little brother healthy and smiling, and Daniel watching her with something she couldn't quite name. Her throat tightened with an emotion she refused to examine too closely. At the small celebration dinner afterward, Junho excused himself early, giving Yuna a meaningful look. She and Daniel walked back to the penthouse in companionable silence, the spring air warm and full of promise. "I'm proud of you," Daniel said as they rode the elevator up. "What you've accomplished, it's remarkable." "I had help," she said, looking at him. "You did the work." They entered the apartment, and Yuna felt the weight of unspoken things pressing down on her. 2 months. They had 2 months left, and then what? Would she move out? Find a tiny apartment, and go back to being alone? Would they run into each other at events and pretend to be strangers? The thought made her chest ache. "Daniel," she started, but he was already walking toward his room. "Good night, Yuna. Congratulations again." The door clicked shut. Yuna stood in the empty living room, surrounded by everything money could buy and nothing she actually wanted, and finally admitted to herself what had been true for months. She'd fallen in love with her husband. The realization terrified her. She'd broken the most important rule of their arrangement. Worse, she had no idea if he felt anything beyond the careful friendship they'd built. He was kind to her, yes, but he was kind to everyone. Thoughtful, but perhaps just dutiful. She thought of the way he sometimes looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching, the way his voice softened when he said her name, the way he'd held her in the hospital. But she couldn't be sure. Daniel Kang had spent his entire life hiding behind masks. How could she know what was real? She decided to wait, 2 months until the contract ended. If he wanted her to stay, he would say something. If he didn't, well, she'd survived worse. But as the weeks passed, Daniel seemed to retreat. He came home later again. Their dinners became less frequent. When they did talk, he was distracted, distant. Yuna told herself it was work stress, but fear crept in with every day of silence. He was pulling away, preparing for the end, maybe ready for her to leave. 3 weeks before their anniversary, Daniel came home at 2 a.m. Yuna heard him moving through the apartment, the clink of glass, the heavy footsteps of exhaustion. She got up, pulled on a robe, and found him on the terrace, tie loosened, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring out at the city. "You should be asleep," he said without turning around. "So should you." She joined him at the railing. The night air was cool, carrying the faint smell of rain. "Bad day? Bad year." He took a drink. "Bad decade, maybe. Want to talk about it?" He laughed, but there was no humor in it. What's there to say? I've spent my entire life building something I'm not sure I even want. I've sacrificed everything for a company that would replace me in a day if I died. I've lived in this beautiful prison, alone, telling myself it was enough. That success was enough. He finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes stole her breath. And then you came along and ruined everything. Yuna's heart stopped. I can leave early if you want. If this isn't working, that's not what I meant. He set down his glass and turned to face her fully. Yuna, you ruined everything because you made me want things I'd convinced myself I didn't need. You made this apartment feel like a home. You made me rush through meetings so I could have dinner with you. You made me realize that I've been half alive for 15 years, and I didn't even know it until you showed me what living actually feels like. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Daniel? I know I have no right to ask, he continued, his voice rough. The contract ends in 3 weeks. You'll get your money and you'll be free to live your life. But I need you to know that this year with you has been the best year of my life, and the thought of you leaving is destroying me. Then ask me to stay, she whispered. I can't. Why not? He looked away, jaw working. Because it wouldn't be fair. You married me out of necessity, not choice. You deserve better than a man who doesn't know how to love properly, who's married to his work, who's 15 years older and set in his ways. You deserve someone who can give you everything, not someone who's still learning how to feel. Yuna felt tears sliding down her cheeks. You idiot, she said, her voice breaking. Do you think I care about any of that? Do you think I haven't noticed that you learn my favorite foods and leave me coffee and hold me when I'm scared? Do you think I haven't felt you trying every single day to be better, to be present? You say you don't know how to love. But Daniel, you've been showing me every day for months. He stared at her, something desperate and hopeful breaking through his careful control. You feel the same way? Yes, you impossible man. I love you. I've loved you for months, and it's been killing me because I thought you couldn't feel the same. Yuna. He said her name like a prayer, like an apology, like a promise. Then he was kissing her, his hands cradling her face like she was something precious and breakable. She kissed him back with everything she'd been holding inside, all the longing, the fear, the desperate hope. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he pressed his forehead to hers. I love you, he said. I don't know when it started. Maybe the first time you smiled at me. Maybe when you stood up to that woman at the gala. Maybe the moment you signed that contract with your hand shaking but your eyes steady. But I love you, and I want you to stay. Not because of the contract, not for appearances, but because I choose you, and I want you to choose me. I already did, she whispered. Months ago. I just didn't know if you noticed. He laughed, the sound wet and shaky. I noticed everything. The way you bite your lip when you study. The way you hum while cooking. The way you look at your brother like he's your whole world. The way you've made this cold apartment feel like somewhere I actually want to be. I noticed all of it, and I fell in love with all of it. They stood there holding each other while the city sparkled below them. Two people who'd found each other in the most transactional of circumstances and discovered something real. So what happens now? Yuna asked eventually. Now? Daniel pulled back to look at her, his eyes warm in a way she'd never seen. Now we start over, properly. I take you on actual dates. We learn how to be married for real, not just on paper. We build something that's ours, not dictated by contracts or necessity. He paused, suddenly uncertain. If that's what you want? That's what I want, she said, smiling through her tears. Though I have one condition. His expression turned wary. What's that? No more separate bedrooms. He laughed, really laughed, and the sound filled her with joy. I think I can manage that. They went inside together, leaving the lights of Seoul behind them, and for the first time since she'd signed that contract, Yuna felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, Yuna woke up to find Daniel watching her, his expression soft in the early light filtering through the windows. She'd expected awkwardness, maybe regret, but instead she found only warmth. "Good morning," he said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Is it weird that this feels completely natural?" she asked. "No weirder than falling in love with your contract wife." She laughed and he kissed her, slow and sweet, like they had all the time in the world. Maybe they did. At breakfast, Daniel made coffee while she attempted pancakes, both of them moving around the kitchen with an ease that had taken months to build. Junho called to say he'd gotten accepted into university, his voice bright with excitement. Daniel took the phone and congratulated him, and Yuna watched her husband, her real husband now in every sense that mattered, and felt her heart overflow. "I was thinking," Daniel said as they ate, "maybe we should renew our vows. Something small, just us and Junho and a few close friends. Make it real." "It already is real," Yuna said. "I know, but I want to stand in front of people and choose you openly. Not as part of some arrangement, but because you're the person I want to spend my life with." "Okay," she agreed, smiling. "But I'm keeping the original wedding date as our anniversary. I fell in love with you during that year. I don't want to erase it." "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts. They made the rest possible." He reached across the table and took her hand. "I don't deserve you." "Probably not," she teased. "Lucky for you, love isn't about deserving." 3 weeks later, on what would have been the end of their contract, they stood together in the same small venue where they'd first married. This time, Junho was healthy and smiling. This time, Daniel's parents looked genuinely happy, his mother whispering to his father that maybe their son had made the right choice after all. This time, when they exchanged vows, they were words they'd written themselves, full of promises about building a life together, about choosing each other every day, about love that grows from unexpected places. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, again, Daniel kissed Yuna like he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment. And maybe he had. Maybe they both had. At the small reception, Junho pulled Yuna aside, his eyes serious. "Are you happy?" he asked. "Really happy? Because I'd understand if this was still just... if you needed to..." "I'm happy," she interrupted gently. "I'm so happy it scares me sometimes. I love him, Junho, and he loves me. We're building something real." Her brother's eyes filled with tears. "You saved my life," he said. "I'll never forget that. But I'm glad you saved your own life too." Daniel appeared beside them, slipping an arm around Yuna's waist. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," Junho said, grinning. "Though I'm still getting used to calling you my brother-in-law." "You can call me Daniel," he said. "We're family now. Really family." Later, as they danced, Daniel was terrible at it, all stiff formality. But he tried because she wanted to. Yuna rested her head on his chest and listened to his heartbeat. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "That contract we signed, how terrified I was, how sure I was that this would be the worst decision I'd ever made." His arms tightened around her. "And now? Now I think it might have been the best." "Might have been?" She looked up at him. This man who'd surprised her in every possible way, who'd shown her that love could grow even in the most unlikely places, who chose her every day and made her believe she was worth choosing. "Definitely was," she corrected. "Best decision I ever made." "Even though I'm terrible at dancing?" "Especially because you're terrible at dancing. You're doing it anyway, for me." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile that he reserved just for her. "I'd do anything for you. I thought you knew that by now." "I'm starting to," she said, and kissed him while their friends and family applauded and the future stretched out before them, uncertain but bright. They left the reception early, driving to the penthouse that had once felt like a museum and now felt like home. As they rode the elevator up, Daniel took her hand. "Nervous?" he asked. "About what?" "Starting our real life together." Yuna considered this. There would be challenges ahead. They'd have to navigate his demanding career and her medical residency. They'd have to learn how to fight and how to forgive. They'd have to figure out how to blend their different worlds, their different histories. But when she looked at him, at the man who'd held her while she cried and learned her coffee order and loved her brother as his own, she felt only certainty. "No," she said. "I'm not nervous at all." The elevator doors opened, and they stepped into their home together, leaving behind the people they'd been when they'd first signed that contract, two desperate strangers making a cold transaction, and embracing the people they'd become, two souls who'd found each other against all odds and chosen, every day, to build something beautiful from the most unlikely beginning. Outside, the city lights sparkled like promises, and inside, two hearts beat in sync, writing a love story that had started with a signature on a piece of paper and would last for all the signatures still to come, on mortgage papers, on birth certificates, on anniversary cards, on a life built together one choice at a time. Because in the end, that's what love was. Not a single moment of decision, but 1,000 small choices to stay, to try, to hope, to believe that even the most impossible beginnings could lead to the most beautiful endings.